Cool. So we'll get started in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to Walk with TFB. Tim Bryson here, and as y'all know, I'm a Black millennial who's eager to have unfiltered conversations with authentic people centered on education, sport, and culture. Today, we're talking about all things player development in the global sense, because player development is global, given the number of countries, continents that sport has made itself to over the last hundreds of years. And today, we're joined by 4 panelists from 4 different countries and 3 different continents, respectively, to talk more about their story, their gifts, their roles, and how player development is continuing to globalize in ways that we can and should be preparing ourselves moving forward in our future. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists. First, we have Ed Jones, and we'll move from Ed to Alfred to Lacee, and then to Will Bryce. Ed, if you don't mind, just first telling us more about who you are, where you're working, where you're located, and how you got into this field called player development.
Hey everybody, Ed Jones. Only people call me Edward are my wife's family, so everybody else calls me Ed. So if you call me Edward, we're not friends. But anyway, I am the founder of Beyond the Field Program LLC, which dives into player development. I was in the role for 6 years at the college level at the University of Houston, University of Kansas, and Baylor. I could be found in Kansas City, Missouri, and I will be at the draft. So if you're there, hit me up. And then I got into this work. I was a high school coach for 6 years, and I love people. I love building relationships, and I kind of build relationships not only with my players, but players in the district or local city. And the University of Houston, Tom Herman, the head coach at the time, came one day. I was telling him about our players, and he was like, "I want to interview you right now." And I was like, "Whoa, not ready for that." But he's very honest with me. He was like, he's like, "I need a positive Black male to influence my team." And so I was all right. I was like, all right, let's go. I graduated from U of H, so I was excited. No dig at Dr. Lacee, who graduated from Rice. We are still cool. But yeah, so that's how I got into it.
Love that. Alfred, talk to us, man. Your story is very unique as well, given your international athlete experience and the NCAA model as well. Hold on, you muted, my friend. Oops.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alfred Aboya. I'm the head coach here at the NBA Academy, Africa, based here in Saly in Senegal. Was born and raised in Cameroon, then moved to the US, went to school at UCLA, then played a little bit of professional basketball. Then my college coach asked me to come help him out. He was a head coach in Mississippi State. That's where I kind of started getting involved with player development, working with kids. Spent 2 years in Mississippi State, then moved to Iowa. I was with the Minnesota Timberwolves G League team, the Iowa Wolves. Spent 2 years there, and that's where I found my calling. I felt like, where the most help is needed is here in the continent of Africa. Being a kid from this continent. So when the NBA Academy opportunity came about, I jumped on it, and I've been here for 2 years, trying to help kids out in their learning journey ahead.
Love that. Thanks for being here, Alfred. Dr. Lacee, talk to us, man. What's going on?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Dr. Lacee Carmon-Johnson. I currently serve as the manager for basketball advancement with the Toronto Raptors, and I am coming to you today from the 6. I got into player development because people told me that I had to choose what I was passionate and purposeful about, and I wanted to show them and tell them that I did not have to do that. So even today, while I serve as the manager of basketball advancement, I also am an adjunct professor at Western Kentucky, which at one point I held a full-time teaching role there. I also have my own consulting and speaking facilitation business, ACE executive coaching and consulting. And I really just believe in finding ways to continue to develop, empower, and impact others to be the best versions of themselves. So I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to do that every day in the actual role that pays my full-time salary, but I get to spread my wings and do it on a much broader level through educating the sports industry's next professionals, as well as impacting student athletes, coaches, administrators all across the world.
Good to see you, Dr. Lacee. And then last but not least, Will Bryce.
Yeah, thank you. Good to meet everyone. Bryce, work out of the NFL's London office. I head up football development for us globally outside of the USA. My background was actually trying to get into NFL Europe, which was a professional league, semi-professional league we had back in the 80s, 90s, early thousands. But when that league finished, sort of pathway got redirected, went and become a physical therapist and strength coach, and definitely always interested in the development side of whether it's athletic development, scouting, just analysis of movement in the body. And I think there was a really good opportunity, good timing, a little bit of luck, everything thrown in to take a job to start back up some football development opportunities for players around the world, to reestablish pathways for them to get either to college in the US via football or directly into the league. So happy to share what we're doing and how we're doing it with everyone today.
Super dope. Thanks for being here, Will. So let's get straight to it. Segment 2, right? We're here to talk about global player development. And the one thing I think that's very unique, particularly in the US, of course, as we know, is the NCAA model. We also know that college athletics doesn't exist outside of the US in the same way it does in the NCAA model. So student athlete development is very localized to the United States of America. Yet player development continues to athletics continues to internationalize and globalize in ways through deliberate practices like recruiting, as well as different mega events and major events like NFL, London Games, of course, the Basketball Africa League, et cetera. But Ed, man, player development, this is your lane, right? It's something that you teach to both people in the US, but also looking more globally as well. One, what is it? But then 2, where have you seen trend-wise over the last, 2 or 3 years as it relates to the questions people are asking about player development as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came up with a definition about 3 years ago because it's newer to college football, and coaches would come in and be like, what do you do? What is player development, right? So I was like, all right, had to come up with something. So I define it as the enhancement of the student athlete experience through intentional and holistic initiatives and programming. And so the 4 words I really sit on are enhancement, experience, intentional, and holistic. And so that's kind of how I broke it down to. It's just your effort to enhance the experience. So then if a coach says dive deeper into that, I will always say, okay, so and Will, you know this from the body, our players will go lift weights, right? They're going off their own strength, but they will take supplements to enhance the workout. And so I talk about that as player development. Your experience at the university, you have world-class coaches, you have world-class, classes, professors, teachers, trainers, everybody's world-class in places I've been and other places around. But player development helps enhance that experience where it's not just, hey, I'm just here to play football. And I know for me, I had 120 guys and all of them thought they were going to NFL. And it was like, hey, let's figure some things out here to help you. Let's take these skills and help you in life. And the trends are pretty interesting. Because the position is growing like massively. Like I started in 2016 and I did now let me start off with this. I'm not a statistical person by any means, but I did some statistics on like where it was in 2016 and 2021. I think the position grew like 166%. And now the phase that's happening in college athletics, specifically football, is people are getting staffs. And so I'm very passionate about helping people define it, because what I know is that coaches, for instance, they're just competitive. So let's say I see Coach Alfred, he's got 15 people on staff and 3 people on his staff do player development. If I'm a coach in his conference, I just want 3 people to do player development. I don't care about the position. It's just competitive. So it's growing, but the education is still lacking in a sense.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff, Ed. And Coach Alfred, man, you played and competed in the US, went back to our home continent, and are now coaching in the NBA Africa Academy. What have you seen as it relates to player development in the US as a college athlete, but also have you implemented as a head coach now with NBA Africa Academy?
I'll piggyback on what Ed just said about player development and what it is. I think it depends on the audience that you have in front of you. Because I was a player development in college, Mississippi State as a graduate assistant at the pro level, the G League, and now with the kids here in the continent, it's 2 different groups. And my experience in comparing the player development in the US, the lane that I was in basketball and here is that people grew up in the US with the culture of basketball. If I stay with the sport of basketball, the things that they know by virtue of being around, as opposed to the continent here where kids, the basketball language, you don't know anything about. So you have kids that don't even know what screen is. So in the hat that I'm wearing in the NBA Academy Africa is really the role of educator, educate the kid about everything about the sport in general, but specifically about the different relationships on the court, the two-man game, the three-man game, even off the court, things that you need to expect to immerse yourself in the community that you're in. Here in the NBA Academy Africa, we have 13 different nationalities. Africa is a big continent with 54 countries, so it's hard to manage kids with different backgrounds, with different customs, with different socio-economic, but even political views, but making all about their development and being a model citizen when they leave us, whether we go and play pro in the US or college, play in major college in the US. That's really the role and that's the view that I have about player development and the main differences between player development here in the continent and what I live through when I live in the US.
This is good stuff. We're warming up. Dr. Lacee, man, you worked in the college sports space, now work in the professional athlete space. I mean, as Coach Alfred said, it depends on the audience. So what are some similarities, some differences, the things they can learn as far as college and pro can learn from each other as it relates to player development in your world?
I think to be completely honest, the professional space is kind of lacking well behind the college space as far as the developmental offerings. And part of that is just the narrative, which I am personally trying to seek to change of what player development is in the professional space. It has been much more of a, let's see, I don't want to use this other term, so I'm going to say much more of a service-oriented industry. And let me tell you this, I'm not making reservations for folks. I will make a reservation for the team if we're doing some culture building, but don't call me to make a reservation for you and your girlfriend. That's not helping me to help you develop, because at the end of the day, when you leave the sports world and you have to make a reservation on your own and you don't know how to do that, I have done a disservice for you. So when you look at the difference between college and pro, college is very much so, there's pillars in a lot of different programs where you're focusing on leadership, career, personal development, mental health has now been added into that. DEI is sometimes a part of that. So there's all these different layers of what student athlete development can look like. And I mean, you have to focus upon that, because when you think about the fact that the majority of our student athletes are not going to go pro. So they need to be prepared for what's going to come next a lot sooner. And then the ones who do go to the professional level, something that needs to be understood once they get to the professional level is just because they signed that contract, they weren't pro 2 days ago before they signed it. So there's still developmental aspects that need to occur. And even especially where I am in basketball, where the majority of my guys are coming out at 19, 20, 21 years old, and many people who are graduating college are 22, 23 years old, there's a big gap. There's a big gap that exists as far as what they need, how much we still have to kind of hold their hand and walk them through what's going to be next. Because when you do turn professional, there's a lot of money at stake. You become a walking billboard. And those developmental aspects, they come with a much higher cost if you fail at them.
It's good stuff. And Will, again, we talk more on the one-to-one, even the team type of level, but I want to bring us out, right? Because you're focused on the NFL International and helping to grow the game outside of the US. Well, I know you put together a few slides, so I would love for you to share your screen and go through some of the slides to talk more about NFL International. And in the interim, those who are on the call, as far as our both panelists and guests, any questions you have about things that have been discussed currently, already, but also things you want to discuss coming out of this presentation, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll make sure your questions get answered over the next 30 minutes. But I'll turn the floor over to you, Will, to share more about NFL International.
Yeah, thank you. And just before I jump into that, I would go back to what Alfred had mentioned there, and he hit so many of the key areas of challenges and areas of focus that we deal with as well. I think that's just, it's not sport specific, obviously. It's very much the individual. We're trying to get players from around the world into college or into help them get to the pros, and it's the same thing. And it's also an issue where we're educating a lot of the player engagement staff on these unique challenges they'll face by having that international player on their team, especially in the NFL, because there's so many less international players in our league than there is in the NBA. So they might be the first player from Germany or outside of North America that they've had on the roster. So they're experiencing this for the first time alongside the player. So it's kind of a unique situation.
It's good.
So let me pull up my screen here, and I'm going to try and fly through these slides, give a little context to what we're doing. There's a whole lot that we are doing. I want to try and touch on most of it, but I'd do a disservice to it if I spend too long on one area. So, I mean, broadly speaking, for us in international, I think a lot of people are aware of the games that we play globally now in London or Germany or Mexico. And that's, a big goal of ours is fan growth in terms of international. But what we've learned is that actually if we have our fans follow players, and specifically if we have players from their countries, they're more inclined to follow that player as well, and therefore become a fan of that team. So 8 years ago, we started really looking at this pyramid, which is a pretty normal pyramid for any sport or any organization to look at, where you've got grassroots at the bottom going up to elite at the top. And we sort of looked at, the various models that exist, whether that's the Olympic sports, whether that's in soccer, whether that's in the NBA, and what my friends and colleagues over there are doing internationally, and looked at how do we approach this from a business standpoint. And we actually decided, let's make it hard on ourselves. Let's start right at the top. Let's prove that talent around the world can make it into the NFL and not have to go through the normal pathway or development pathway of college. And we really, we knew this, one, because of NFL Europe, planted a lot of the right seeds, and now they're coming to fruition. And we knew the talent was there. It just needed the opportunity and the spotlight put on it, and really just bridge the gap that's the Atlantic Ocean and bring the talent to the United States. So we started what is called the International Player Pathway Program. It's finding the best talent that's not in, the basically is not American nationality around the world. We'll scout that all year round. We'll do our various combines, which is the line underneath where we try them out. We've done that the last few years in Tottenham. We've done them in Mexico. We've done them in Germany. We've done them in Australia. And we'll bring the best, a very small group. This year it was 13 players. We took them to IMG Academy down in Florida. We trained them for 10 weeks, a very intensive training camp. On touching on the prior subject, we certainly tried to focus on a lot of different areas, trying to have expert speakers in different fields, talk to them about what that transition's like, as well as our alumni. And, try from there, they'll go into the league via an allocation process. And if you keep your eyes peeled over the next week, you'll see press release on who the players are going into the league this year through our program. That's going to happen here after the draft. And so really, once we prove success on that model, and I'll touch on that in a bit more detail, we then focused on the academy, which is sort of a high school age group, to get that pathway established into college football. And concurrently, whilst we were doing those two things, we were always working on that grassroots layer and what is flag football for us. And now recently, with the interest of flag football being in the LA 2028 Olympics, working closely with our friends at IFAF, see their logo on the left side of the screen, which is the International Federation of American Football, and really looking at what that pathway can be in the short term and certainly the longer term. So a lot of exciting work. I think we're really only scratching the surface and understanding what we don't know at this point. And what I would say, it's being very well received at all levels and internally in the business. And so I think we're really challenged to how do we grow this? How do we increase the number of players that are playing on Sundays that are from international countries, 5, 7, 10 years down the line? How do we try and rival the NBA, other MLS, or certainly the Premier League here in London, in England, with the number of international players? I think when we look at it, when we've started to really study and look at trends, the number of foreign-born players are slowly growing. Nigeria, Canada, Australia, with all the punters and kickers, are kind of skewing that a little bit more from Australia specifically, as well as some of the initiatives that we've been running, but still small numbers in the grand scheme of things when you look at the league. And when you look at a lower level underneath that, and you look at just Division I football and the number of international players. Now, when I first saw these and we started to track this over the last couple of years, it really was surprising just how many international players there are playing Division I college football. The slight dip in 2021, we think, is probably due to COVID, and it just being harder to travel overseas. And just this past year, we saw in the draft guys getting picked in the first 4 rounds, all from overseas as well. So things definitely seem to be trending in the right direction. There's certainly an appetite within college football, this is a different conversation when it comes to recruitment, how college football is recruiting, their processes. Obviously, the use of Twitter and social media makes it a lot more accessible to find players all around the world. And so that's a really exciting proposition as we look into the future. So I'm just going to flick through on to give you a quick snapshot of the International Player Pathway Program. So from 2016 was our first year of bringing players to the United States. If there's any Vikings fans here, that was the year that they drafted the German kid, Moritz Böhringer. He'd never played any college football, any high school football in the US. And they drafted him from Germany. He was just playing amateur club football. Freak athlete, but that really got things moving at a warp speed. That was followed up by Jordan Mailata getting drafted by the Eagles. He's now their starting left tackle, played in the Super Bowl, and so on and so forth. But I think what we're trying to do from a business is trying to catch up to the success of the players just on the field, with how do we, from a media standpoint, and even from a staffing development standpoint, because you talk about developing the players and there's a lot that goes into that, but then you also having to develop and upskill staff globally that know what we're looking for in a player. If you're talking scouting, or in the weight room, if you're talking development remotely in Brazil, for example, like that takes a lot of time. And then you look at coaching development. And right now, behind me, I'm in our office here in London, and we've got rooms dedicated to, I guess, more so British players that are successful. Guy behind me played in NFL Europe, and he's now the D-line coach of the Dallas Cowboys. He's from London, and he's the only full-time non-American coach in the NFL. So that's another area that we would look at through the long term. How do we develop our coaches and provide them with opportunities to be successful? So the IPP program, every year we've run this, we will send a certain amount of players. Usually it's one division at a time, so 4 players into the league. And these 5 over the last 5, so 2017 through to 2021, they've all made the roster at some point in their first 3 years of being on that club. And so you want to look at it, 25% success rate. Is that good? Is that bad? I mean, this is like saying an undrafted free agent making a roster. That's not a bad hit rate. And I think with the lack of their development in the sport, FA was on the left-hand side, was playing football in England for like 6 months before we found him. Prior to that, he wasn't playing organized sports. Jordan was playing rugby league. Jakob-Johnson is probably the most developed. He played in Germany, played at University of Tennessee, and then came back to Germany. And then we gave him an opportunity after he went completely undrafted, unlooked at the year prior. he ended up making the Patriots first year. He was allocated to them. And then the next year, David Bader played football in Germany, and then Samus Reyes was playing basketball. And so our most successful players really haven't had that much development in the sport they're playing. But what they do have is either extreme level of size, length, speed, athleticism, just athletic traits the NFL clubs covet. And then what we'll try and do is when we bring these guys into our program, we will work with them on trying to round that out in terms of how to be a professional, how to assimilate to that environment, how to make them their best coach, essentially, because they're the kind of the more the back end of the roster players who coaches aren't going to give much time to in the preseason, let alone, during the season. How are they going to continue to develop as a professional, take care of their bodies, manage things off the field, being away from family in a foreign country, but then obviously continue to get better at their craft and in their position. So there's so much that can go into. And I'll just touch on the academy side of things. I mean, our NFL academy, we've only got one. We're not quite where the NBA are yet, with multiple around the world. So we've got one. It's based in England, up at Loughborough, which is a really strong sporting institution in the UK. Started in 2019, just before COVID. And, we've had a lot of success, I think, with certain individuals, with providing them a platform, really, to showcase their skills, get filmed, get them to the US, get them on college campuses. I think a lot of the feedback that the colleges want, they just want to see these kids in person, make sure that they pass the eye test. And I think, and I'll end this in touch on Emmanuel Okoye, who's the young man on the right-hand side under that future stars kind of bracket, but just really making sure that they are as advertised, and the NFL can, is obviously supporting that. So, and I'll bring it full cycle. It's great to have coach here from the NBA Academy. So Emmanuel is from Nigeria. He actually tried out for the NBA Academy, got told no. I guess he doesn't have a very good jump shot, or there's something wrong with his game. But I think it speaks to the way football's going. If you've got size, if you've got athletic ability, which you look at those numbers there, he absolutely does. He wasn't playing we ran a camp in Africa in Ghana last year, where OCU Manura had invited this kid to attend. He did great. We brought him into our academy in September. He'd never played football before. And then within 4 months, he's got offers to Tennessee, USC, Vanderbilt, Texas Tech, you name it, Ole Miss. He literally just got back from taking some official visits today. And so it's very unique. It's something that our sport can offer. It clearly is able to offer, that maybe Premier League, rugby, even basketball, maybe it has a longer development time within the skill set required to be successful, versus football, especially the college level, being more looking for the athletes and then probably teaching them the game after the fact. And so really, really interesting. You look at the growth of, as I showed you on that graph, of number of kids in NCAA football at the moment, growing at the rate it's growing. Us branching out and doing a lot more active, kind of, I guess, scouting of this age group around the world. I think it's going to be a very interesting area over the next 5-10 years. And just finally trying to bring it all together, which is important to us. So that these kids obviously need to learn from those that walk the path ahead of them. So on the left is FA, who's now at Washington at the moment, but then next to him are kids in our academy, the next two. So one's at Colorado now, the next one's at Temple. And then next to them are two players who were at the Steelers. And then next to him, he's currently at Houston. And then the next kid works for us teaching flag football now. So I think to put them all together, they're all from England. But for them to spend time with one another, be at our events together, working the events, sharing only the experiences that they can kind of give to one another is a beautiful thing. And I think when you look at, say, player development, they're going to learn way more than they could ever from myself or my staff than they can't from these men around them. So I think I'll end it with that. I hope that gives you a very, very quick whistle-stop tour. I'm sure I've moved through things way too quick, so I apologize, but hopefully that's given you some idea of what we're doing out here in NFL International. And as I said, there's so much more to do. I saw Travis Murphy just popped up, and so we're like trying to work with Travis to help us navigate this ever-changing landscape and issues that we're finding ourselves in. So yeah, no, really excited to share that with everyone. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Will, for the presentation. And yes, make sure y'all tune in for tomorrow at noon for Travis's conversation, because it's gonna be really good talking about athlete immigration. But I want to bring us to the chat. I'm going to first start with you, Will, before moving to Alfred and then to Lacee, to ask a question from one of our guests, right? Talking about power, right? Particularly power in regards to player development and how, whether it's the NFL International, NBA Africa Academy, of course, but then Lacee, you working with, in Toronto with some international athletes, balance bringing Westernized ideas to player development, to either, whether it's African countries and or non-American countries, without imposing on their existing ideologies and cultures. So how do we have to be mindful of culture when educating and when working within this player development space?
That's a great question.
It's a really good question.
Well, I mean, I'll speak from my experience and allow others to jump in, but you know, we were just in Kenya for our last camp 2 weeks ago, you know, second iteration of NFL Africa. I mean, we definitely wanted to spend longer have more contact time during this camp. It's like a 4-day camp this year. So I think increasing our contact time during that period of time, I think we had current NFL players who have roots of first, second generation African came and ran the camp with us. As well as some of our legends and alumni were also there, again, trying to share their experiences. I think if it's player driven, it's maybe a little more powerful to share their experience with them. And, you know, we really, from our standpoint, or my limited experience with players from Africa, bringing them to the US, through the International Player Pathway Program, that's the first time when we bring them into our camp that they usually have come into the United States. So we feel it's important, not just for any, you know, player from Cameroon is, you know, he's different, but he's in the same boat as a player from Germany. They might not have, German culture is very different to American culture. So you have to bring that player, you know, he's going to benefit just as much from the difference in food, the environment, the expectations, the yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, you know, these are different things as well that I've had to adjust, and my American colleagues kind of remind you on a daily basis just how those differences still exist, right? So I think we've been able to slowly provide a safe and slow gradual, what's the word, like landing into the US through the IPP program with that 10-week camp in Florida, where they can be immersed around it. It's obviously a high school at IMG, so that provides daily interaction with of such a diverse group. But yes, it's for sure a challenge. But if this is the route that these players want to go, and they want to go professional, if I'm talking with the NFL from an NFL perspective, they've got, you know, there's certain things they're just going to have to adjust to, and I think it's our job, you know, certainly in my role, to help them and provide the support around them. But they kind of, there's some things that you just can't get around. You got to get things from a living perspective, right? When you go get social security number, you got to open a bank account, you got to do things that some of these guys haven't done before when they were in. You know, I'm thinking of a couple guys who we had this year from Nigeria, didn't have a bank account ever in their lives. So you're trying to work with them on and understanding that, and then you're about to get a lot more money than you've ever had in your life. And then how do you know, and then there's so many other questions and scenarios you've got to work through. So
that's good.
I hope that kind of shared some insight from us. I mean, it's a great question.
Sure, Coach Alfred, what's up? What you thinking about?
Yeah, first of all, Will, man, I want to thank you for those slides, man. I definitely see that we are, you know, fighting the same battle. we have the same challenges, which is good to know, meaning that we can definitely collaborate on some of them. As far as the question is concerned, the experience. First of all, even here in the continent, I mentioned earlier, we have 13 different nationalities in the academy. All right. It makes it already challenging for kids that are 15, 16 years old that never left their home country to come to a different country and see kids from other countries that don't even speak the same language. We have francophone kids who speak English, Portuguese kids, Arabic. So in that melting pot of different people from different places already give them a foundation as when they will leave to go to the US. So they already learning those coping skills, coping mechanism, how to interact with other people from that are they might not look different than you, but they are different than you. Their culture is different, and I think from my experience, being a kid from this continent, having to go to what Will just said, I had my bank account after I think it was my second year, sophomore year in college. I didn't know what a bank account was. Like, how do you? Where do you keep you keep your money in your house? So having to go through that is very, very important. So when I come here and teach our kids, it's something that I've been through. So in me, they already see the pathway. So if the coach I have in front of me went through the same struggle, and I can relate to him, it makes it a little bit easier for them when it's time for them to go to US. And the other thing too, we do in the academy here, we go to the US at least 3 times a year. We go there and play tournaments. So the kids not only have the chance to compete against kids their age there, but they also get a small bites of how things work over there, how's life over there. We have kids here that they see snow for the first time. Even that alone is it's a challenge. But the fact that we travel once every while to go to the US and we expose them to those things, I think is definitely setting the stage for them when they go. They won't be foreign to some of those things.
Lacee, we talking about power here, right? I think player development is that's a US thing that we made up and said, like, this is what we're gonna call it, this is what it's gonna mean, right? What does that look like when working with international athletes, especially in a country that they're not native to?
I think the biggest thing for us here is support. I am extremely privileged to have a Nigerian president who, he has his own nonprofit, Giants of Africa. And even through that, not only does he do a really great job of trying to make sure he exposes our African-born players to these types of events and the people that are a part of it. I mean, you got millionaire, billionaire folks who are showing up at these different events, but he's providing the exposure to them and those connections and building those bridges. But then also really letting them know, these are the real giants of Africa, and you have a duty to go back and make sure you're supporting, not only supporting financially, but putting on camps and showing the kids that you too can have an opportunity to come out, and these are the ways and the things that you need to do with that. The other piece of it is it's kind of multi-layered, where we're in Canada, so we have an entire country behind us, which is a phenomenal experience for our guys. But then my international players really have a heart and a passion for impacting places that are beyond just where their feet occupy. So we have, they have their foundations and things that are here, but they also do things back in their home countries as well. And for us, it's how can we support these initiatives? How can we connect and build them to the right players or the right stakeholders and constituents, whether that's something that the NBA League Office has or the NBA PA has as well. And they do, the PA has a European fashion weeks that they do during the summer, and they will bring guys over to participate in that. And the ones who are interested in, broadening their horizons well past basketball to get maybe into like fashion, clothing design, and different avenues as that. But ultimately, for us, it's about serving, it's about educating, and it's about innovating. And how can we be that connector for those players, and understanding that they're going to come in with some unique circumstances. So we can't put our biases around it because they have 8 brothers and sisters. Well, they have 8 brothers and sisters. They're trying to figure out how they're going to get those 8 brothers and sisters over here. Those 8 brothers and sisters are going to be very active in their foundations. They're going to be very active in their daily lives as their chefs, their drivers, and all the other things. And so we also have to figure out a way to positively support them as well. And it's not just the athlete, like we're taking in the entire family, moms, sisters, nieces, like we know them all.
Ed, I'm coming to you in a second, but a quick follow-up to Lacee's Lacee's comment. Like, what have you had to unlearn about athlete development, player development when working with the Raptors, right? In regards to what you learned either in the college space or professional space before you started there?
I think I had to unlearn that I have time, because I don't have time. I have guys that I see for 10 days. I have guys that I might have as a free agent and I get them for 3 months. And then I have guys that I've been with, throughout the entire 2 years that I have, and they'll be here for, well longer than that. And so I don't have time. Like, so for me, I'm trying to figure out ways to make some type of an immediate impact with them. Whether it's understanding what their business development initiatives are, understanding how to just better prepare them for general life skills, understanding like the connections and the relationships that they have, and like who's their person that I need to be in their ear, because they're going to be around much longer than I ever will be. And so the time factor that, we have that finite for maybe 5-6 years because of COVID in college, you don't necessarily have that in the professional space.
Love that answer a lot. Ed, man, I don't know. Looking at this presentation that Will just gave us, and I've said this on multiple occasions over the last 3 years now, college sport the NCAA is not prepared for the influx of international athletes that are coming to the United States. They're just not. So as you're talking with people, player development folks, particularly football staffs that are literally just watching what Will presented to us, what are some of the questions that you have in relates to player development for international athletes? What questions do you think coaches might have as it relates to international athlete recruitment? Because we definitely see it happening both with again, the pyramid we just saw, but also LA 28, as well as other World University games in 2027. But as you're thinking and looking at this, it's like we focus a lot on U.S. athletes, especially Black athletes, football players at that. We're going global. Like, how are we preparing? How can we prepare for this moment?
Yeah, so I've been blessed with the experience. When I was at the University of Houston, we had as Will mentioned, we had a punter from Australia, we had a center from Canada, we had a running back from Liberia. We had some Nigerian players. Being from Houston, if anybody knows Houston, it's very, very a massive.
It's a melting pot.
Yes, that's the best way. I got caught up in time. So, so I had that experience. I think for me, what it showed me was, and everybody's talked about this, and it was interesting. Our punter was 28 years old. He's a 28-year-old freshman, and so our GA, he's older than our GAs, and honestly, he's 2 years younger than me, and like he's like, hey man, we can go get drinks. I'm like, we actually can't. But he's like 10 years younger than coaches, and I think for what I was trying to help our coaches understand is like, and everybody's talked about this, it's like the American culture of football, which is like, do what you say, do it now. And he had the biggest problem with our coach, who his whole deal was he never ever called specialists by their name. He always called them the punter. And this guy's 28 years old from Australia. He's like, why wouldn't this guy just call me? Like, I have a name. My name is Dane. And he's like, call me Dane. And so for me, it was educating coaches that it's not the same at like the football culture, right? Where coaches don't want to grow, in a sense, coaches don't want to change. It's just, this is how I've done it. This is how I've seen this, how I was coached. So I'm gonna keep it. And this is what's successful. And they have to change, because now you're starting to see the globalization. It's like, we'll watch film and I'm like, hey, that kid, that kid from Germany is way better than this kid from Texas. And I love Texas high school football, but we're talking about two different. We're talking about a kid that might play his third year. And we're talking about a kid who's a first round pick. I actually had an opportunity to go to the University of Houston with Sebastian Vollmer, and Will, you may know him. Seabass was from Germany. He was a swimmer. He's 6'9". He played tight end. They moved him to tackle. He played 9 years in the league and got 3 Super Bowl championships with the Patriots, starting left tackle. And so for me, in the American aspect, it's because American football is prideful. The state of Texas was prideful. Like we're the best at it. We're not the best at it. There's a lot coming in. So you want to educate parents or coaches more on. And one thing I've noticed too is specifically, which I really enjoyed in the space, is that international players are going to listen to what we're doing outside of football. They want us when they're going to go to that. They're going to pay attention to the academic presentation. They're gonna pay attention to where they're living on campus. What's the system? What's the bus system on campus? They don't have transportation. And so for me, I loved it because player development, they were in my office all the time. And so it even changed how I did stuff because they're actually a little more prepared in some cases than absolutely a little more prepared than most of my American-born players who are focused on just, I need to get to the league. A lot of international players see it as, this is a great opportunity I have to help my family in a different way rather than a contract. So hopefully that answers it. But the biggest thing I would tell coaches is just to be prepared because there are a lot of challenges. It's already tough from American standpoint. Like when I was at Kansas, 80% of our roster was outside the state. So that was tough. And then if you add an international player to that mix, that's tough. So coaches just need to, for me, coaches and administration, honestly, they need to prepare themselves and well-verse themselves in, as Lacee said, and as Alfred and Will said, truly supporting athletes.
Well, this is a good transition. I'm going back to you, Will, and then to Alfred, because I think supporting athletes is ideal, right? It's cute, but I think we also need to be honest and recognize that sport is a business. As I'm looking over here, looking at the NFL, they say they're closer to their $27 billion revenue goal, currently at $19 billion. The NBA is currently at roughly $10 billion. Like, how do we continue and how do we humanize the athlete experience in this player development work that we're doing? Whether that's obviously helping to grow the game, Will, Coach Alfred, whether it's coaching African athletes to either go play professionally and or transition to the United States NCAA model. But how do we humanize the athlete experience in the midst of billion-dollar industries that are continuing to grow and expand across our world? Start with you, Will. Just initial thoughts to answer that question.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that one. I think, look, because most of us on this call, we all deal with the international athletes. I spend more of my time, not in America than in America. I would say that isn't something that the athletes that I see, if I'm speaking to a rugby athlete, student athlete, and their parent, like, they don't necessarily see that from the NFL because that's more of an American perception. I might be, that's maybe a little bold, maybe a little uneducated of me to say, but my perception is, and my experience is that might be more of a US view of it. Because you go to, like when we were just doing our camp in Africa, those kids know it's a way out and they know it's an opportunity for them, but they don't know that number and they don't know it's that $1 billion industry. They see it as Ed pointed out, like, this is a way for me to get an education and do something, with my life. And they're going to be, so I think there's different, I think it's the lens in which you view that from. But it's not going away. It's not going to change anytime soon. It's just going to that number's just going to keep going up probably. So, I think it's that. And then I think I was literally just speaking with it with OC Umanura, comes into our office once a week. He lives in England now, London, and helps, he drives a lot of our NFL Africa initiative. And we were talking about how do we keep these players that we are now putting into the league from Nigeria and elsewhere, how do we keep them close to what's going on so they don't, start to almost lose where those roots and where they came from and almost get accustomed to that American culture or feel entitled or feel a certain way. He's very passionate about keeping them, close to that and giving back. So I think that's one way that comes to mind, is keeping these, like that picture I showed at the end, just keeping the players that are coming through, they're experiencing the opportunities that sport provides at the professional level, grounding them back in where they came from and give back to the next generation really is probably what we try and do. I think it makes it's logical. And when you tend to get a lot more traction and support with those players that are actively involved in doing that than those that choose not to.
No, I appreciate you sharing that perspective and checking me on my U.S. perspective, Will. Alfred, what you thinking about?
It's just my opinion, you know.
No,
wrong, but
I like it for real. That's good.
Yeah, I think I'll give my opinion too. First of all, I think the relationship is a win-win situation. The NBA or the NFL being $1 billion company and investing in the continent. First of all, they want to make their game global. NFL want to be a global game. The NBA want to be a global game. They want to grow their fan base. We're talking about revenues. All right. So that's a win for the NBA, the NFL, those big American companies. Now, where's the win for an African kid? The win for them is the opportunity, as Will mentioned. In the academy right now, we have 34 kids. No, I can bet not 5 of them will make it to the NBA. So that's 29 other kids that will be provided with opportunity for a better life, opportunity to learn, opportunity to maybe go to US, get a degree, be a doctor. That's a win for Africa. The doctors are needed in the continent. So that's how I see and view that relationship. How do you humanize it? That's how you humanize it. It's a win for those big companies in terms of revenue, what they gain, and also it has a big social impact on the kids and families in the continent. So that's my viewpoint.
Yeah, Lacee, you want to jump in with anything before we have closing comments?
No, I agree with Will with the lens. I think it definitely makes a huge difference. You can see it kind of in the ones who are, I would say, less far removed from spending more of their formalized years in their home country versus like having come over and done high school in America and then college in America. They have a much different mindset. And on top of that, not just them, their families. Their families, when they've spent more time in America, then they also think that it's supposed to be bigger, more glamorous, and have X, Y, and Z. But giving back and being a part of Basketball Without Borders, doing things with the Basketball Africa League, being a part of Masai's Giants of Africa events, like those are ways to continue to keep them grounded and remind them, like, you can't ever forget where you come from, and we all have a long way to go.
Awesome. So we're gonna close out segment 3, right? And as I know, for those who listen to the podcast, it's all about support. And so what's up, Deuce? All about support. And so we'll start with Ed, move to Alfred, then Lacee, and then Will. How can the people on this call best support you, your work, your purpose journey? While others are responding, if people are able to reach out to you, feel free to drop your contact information in the chat, because I'm sure a lot of people will be reaching out in the next coming days or weeks to learn more about your individual roles. But again, we'll go Ed, Alfred, Lacee, and Will. How can we best support you in your work?
Awesome. First of all, thank you so much for having me on here, Tim. Thank you all who attended and got up early in the morning for you all that are in state. But for me, I have a podcast called the Player Development Podcast, where I kind of dive into a lot of this stuff at a deeper level. So if you're interested and you like podcasts, it's just the Player Development Pod. I'll put it in the notes. Also, we have a conference coming up, and I have a special offer. If anyone has since you're talking about internationalization, I think I said it correctly, the globalization of sport, someone came on and messaged me that they want to pay for 2 people. So we have 1 spot open. So if there's an international student that anybody knows who is interested in this work or what it may look like in an American model, or like it could be a student, an athlete, or just a student at a university, please let them know. And they can come and rock with us and see Dr. Lacee again. And so, yeah, that's how you can support. And then I'll put all those stuff in the chat. Thank y'all.
You can never stop learning. The way people can support or the way I can, support the kids, because it's really about the kids. It's never stop learning. So sharing of experiences, sharing of knowledge, sharing of opportunity that we have, that's could best help support. Lacee mentioned how the Toronto Raptors, Masai Ujiri being the president, promoting the giving back through the Giants of Africa. I think more effort like that, Giants of Africa, is what is much needed in the country of Africa, because there's some area of Africa that is tough to get there, almost impossible to get there. So by having those different events, will actually attract more people, and that would mean more people to support and more people to help. So that's how the academy or I can be supported.
This one, it doesn't have anything to do, I guess, with like directly supporting me, but it's more when you look at this panel today, I'm the only woman here. And so what I would like to see is to continue to give more women a chance. The women who never play, the women who have a heart for service, the one who's not afraid to speak her mind. Like, I'm tired of being either the only in the room or the first in the room. And so as I continue to share my story, my journey, I just hope that it allows women that are on this call to like have that courage to bust through the doors, but then also to the men who are here and our allies and our champions, that you all continue to just open the doors more willingly, because there's power in diversity of thought, and frankly, just in doing things different and in change.
I think that's the best thing to end on from Lacee. That's perfect.
Well, I want to say thank y'all. Both the participants, y'all been cool, but our panelists have been the real MVPs here. I think as I'm looking at, again, some of my notes, we're coming across 5 different time zones, 4 different countries and 3 continents. I can guarantee this has never happened in the world to date, right? So we're the first to make this happen and look forward to continue growing this in a way that makes sense for us as individuals in our respective countries, but also we can continue to remain connected across the world. Brother Ed, definitely look forward to participating in your conference. Auntie Lacee, man, hope to see you sometime soon. I don't know which country or state we'll be in, but it'll happen. Coach Alfred, I'll be coming to the NBA Academy in June, so I'll connect with you offline and learn more about how we can set some things up while I'm there. And Will, if y'all hiring, bro, what's up? The international athlete, college athlete space, I'm ready for you. And I look forward to coming to London to visit. But again, thank y'all for tuning in to another episode of the Walk with TFB podcast. I hope y'all are enjoying the session that we've had this week. I look forward to seeing y'all, whether it's at noon for the International College Athlete Career Readiness and NIL session, and or other sessions throughout the week, including our athlete immigration session tomorrow at noon with Travis Murphy, who is literally a legend in this space as well. But again, thank y'all for being here. Y'all know what we're doing. And as always, peace out. And we're walking. Have a good night.